Hello everyone, TimeToGrind here, and today I wanted to talk about Doors of Insanity. And Doors of Insanity is a new deck building roguelite that just came out in early access that I truly think has the potential to be the next big game in the genre, just like Slay the Spire. And before we jump into the review, I do just want to let you guys know that I was given a review copy of the game in order to make a video for you all. I never let that influence my reviews, I just like staying as transparent as possible. But Doors of Insanity takes a lot of influence from Slay the Spire. You have your character, you play cards that attack enemies or block damage, you can see enemy intents of what they plan to do, there's passive artifacts, elite enemies, and more, but unlike a lot of the other games that attempt to tackle the genre, Doors of Insanity is presented in a way that feels completely fresh. And I normally don't talk about the art style and music of a game until later in a review, but Doors of Insanity really has a very distinctive experience and presentation to it. The entire game is animated in a similar way to Cuphead, where it looks like older cartoons from back in the day. And the animation on things and overall quality of the art is pretty awesome and close to what you would expect from older cartoons. There's a lot of awesome particle effects, and there's a lot of amazing looking CGI and GFX. I don't know the technical term for it, but every time you go to another room, you're walking down this hallway and doors appear, and they just look really realistic and way more visually impressive than most deck building roguelites. The soundtrack for this game is also one of the best soundtracks I have heard in a roguelite. It is super immersive and the bass is really heavy, and it just draws you into the game and makes the stakes feel like they're really high. I just want to play you a small clip of gameplay with audio only to show how good the soundtrack can be. The humor in this game is unique as well. It's kind of this crude humor a bit, and I honestly really like it and thinks it fits in with the theme of the game and the cartoon aspect and everything like that. And so the overall presentation of the game is absolutely great and really professional and makes you want to keep playing. But how is the gameplay? Because obviously, if you're into roguelites, you know that, at their core, they have to be, good, kind of like any other game. And so overall, like I said earlier, the gameplay is pretty similar to Slay the Spire. You have your mana to spend on cards that attack enemies, you have cards that give you absorb to take less damage, you can see what the enemy intends to do, whether that's attacking you or casting buffs or debuffs or putting something in your deck or healing or blocking. The game does have a couple unique mechanics though. Firstly, there are familiars in the game which are kind of like powers in Slay the Spire. You can summon a cat that will deal damage at the end of its turn, or a fairy that gains you some block every turn. Unlike powers in Slay the Spire though, you can cast these familiars more than once in combat if you keep drawing it. The downside to this though is that you get capped out at 4 familiars. I really think this is an area that should be improved. It feels really bad to immediately get capped out early if you try to run a lot of familiars in your deck, and also you can't even replace the familiars that you have with ones that you're playing. There is this card that allows you to destroy all of your familiars and deal damage to all enemies depending on how many you got rid of, but it's not common enough to get consistently and always use if you want to go on kind of like a familiar path. I think you should either be able to have way more familiars and be balanced around that, or if not, they should do something similar to the defect in Slay the Spire, where you can keep replacing the ones you have and have them give you bonuses when they go away. Another unique mechanic is that you roll some dice every turn, and you can use each die to give you a little block or deal a little damage. And it's pretty small where it isn't super impactful, but it's nice having them. They feel like a bonus. So say you're going to take a crap ton of damage, but you roll a 6, you can maybe block 12 of the damage, which isn't a ton, but it's decent amount to get for free. You can also use them to kill those pesky enemies that have just a tiny amount of health left, which are always really annoying. And so you never rely all on the dice, so you don't get let down, but when they do help you, they are very welcome. Also, there are some cards that interact with dice, but from my first impressions, they weren't the best. Also, the gameplay in general is kind of stats heavy. You can keep finding cards that increase your attack, or cards that, say, increase your damage by 15% or your crit chance by 5%, and to go along with this, there is an entire gear system in the game. You can find weapons, armor, gloves, helmet, shields, and more, and equip them on your character, and this is where a lot of the RPG mechanics come in. And overall, it is really cool finding gear and seeing how your character changed and how they look, but my biggest complaint with this system is that it is all stats. stat-based, like I said earlier. All the gear does is increase your stats that I previously mentioned. I really think that the gear system would be so much more satisfying and fun if the gear had passive effects on them. So like you could find a sword that had a chance to do bouncing lightning damage when you attack someone, or a special armor piece that gave you a chance of just straight up blocking an attack when hit, or if there were elemental effects like burning or bleeding or something like that, especially if there were more cards that dealt with cool effects like that as well. And there are passive relics in the game like Slay the Spire, but I think it would be so much cooler to incorporate and flesh out the system with the gear. One of the biggest selling points in the game beyond the presentation is that it is a deck building roguelite with RPG mechanics, and the gear system is one of the biggest RPG mechanics the game has, so I really think either the passive relics should go on the gear, or if more passives need to be made, just make them for the weapons. And maybe it could be only certain special gear like legendaries or something like it that have the passives. It doesn't need to be all of them, but there needs to be something that makes the gear more exciting. And so in the game you go from area to area killing enemies, getting new cards to add to your deck, gaining new gear and relics, fighting bosses and elite enemies, going to random encounters, which I will say the random encounters in the game are presented very well. Not all of them are the most interesting, but they all at least look interesting. And so you keep going until you die or you beat the boss, which then offers you to risk your victory to go even further and fight these dragons and stuff like that, which I haven't been able to beat yet, and then the game is over. While playing the game, you earn these gems which you use to gain new cards, gear, and even alternate boss paths and gameplay features in the shop. You also gain experience which will level you up across multiple runs, as this allows you to make your character more powerful by boosting different stats on your character. And so this game has gameplay affecting progression across runs, definitely making it a roguelite in my book. And so overall the game just got me hooked. I ended up wanting to play it way more before making the review than I normally do, just because the entire game is so well packaged and it's so unique in the experience that it's trying to give you. And I will say that after playing for several hours, I did start to realize some issues the game has with it launching in early access. And keep in mind, the game did just come out in early access, and if you're watching this way after it was released, hopefully some of these issues have been fixed, but I do need to bring them up because they affected how I played the game now with it just coming out. So the first big thing was, in my experience, it didn't seem like there was a lot of different reliable builds to do with your deck. It mainly felt like the best chance I had was to get a couple of decent defensive cards and then have a lot of attack cards that kept boosting my stats so I could deal a crap ton of damage. I couldn't do a summon specific build that well because the couple times I tried, I couldn't find the card that kills all of your summons to deal damage to all enemies. I also wanted to try a defense build deck, but I couldn't find the card that dealt damage to an enemy equal to your defense. And so there are some potential builds you can do, but either the cards needed to make that build good are so rare you can't find them often, or I just got really unlucky. So I think there definitely needs to be more cards added that give your playstyles variety. And the one cool thing that this game does is after each run you can choose one card from your deck to include a one of in your next deck, because you kind of get to build your own deck of 10 cards between, the attack, defense, and increase your stats. So you could, if you get one really good event card, you can have at least one of it in your starting deck for the next run, which can kind of give you a little bit of variety in the builds, but overall it's not as much as I was hoping for. And this brings me to my next point. The game needs more content and variety badly. You fight up against these same exact enemies over and over. Like if you're on floor 1 and you fight multiple elites, almost all of them, if not all of them, are the same exact elite. And I'm sure that they will add more content to the game, but the game definitely needs more variety in the cards and builds to go on, more mechanics, more enemies, more gear with hopefully more unique abilities, more relics, hopefully more characters down the road that are even more, different from each other. Also with the relics, there seems like there's only 15 passive relics, so you start to see a lot of them similar over and over again, just like the enemies and cards. Another small thing is there is a lot of little loading screens. Every time you get a piece of gear that you want to equip, you have to click your inventory, which loads for 2 seconds. Then you have to equip it and then go back to the hallway, which is a 2-second loading screen. Then you click a door and you get a 4-second loading screen to get into combat. And it may be because that there is a ton of animation, but any way to improve that or allow me to equip the gear I get automatically if I want would be great. And my last main issue with the game is how buggy it is. And at first it seems like it was running perfectly fine, but the more I started to play, the more things I kind of started to notice. First of all, sometimes the game will freeze and you'll have to go back to the main menu and continue your game. Also, this is kind of weird, but I live in Texas where these snowstorms and power outages have been happening, and while I was playing the game, the power went out a couple of times, and the last time, when I came back, all of my progress had been wiped. All of my several hours of leveling up my character and unlocking new bosses and cards and weapons and stuff like that disappeared. And I know it's partly my fault with the power outage, but the game doesn't have cloud storage whatsoever, which if it did, would be completely fine because it would be backed up on the cloud. I also saw on Steam discussions a couple other people had their progress reset, so I think it's something with the game that definitely needs to be addressed. And also the cloud storage would be really awesome, because if you're making a roguelite with a ton of progression, you know, it's kind of nice to have the assurance that all of your progress won't just be wiped. I mean, I was super loving this game and I was wanting to show it off in live streams and stuff like that, but I can't lie, I am completely devastated and unmotivated to play the game again. I lost all my progress and it makes me want to just wait until the game officially comes out rather than keep on kind of playing it while it gets updated. And so overall, I do think this game has massive potential to be the next big roguelite deck builder like Slay the Spire. The game feels like a unique experience with how awesome the presentation is, and the game has a very solid foundation to build upon. It just needs a ton of more content, bug fixes, and hopefully cloud storage. So if you are super into roguelite deck builders, I would say it's probably worth picking up right now, but otherwise I might wait a little bit until the game gets a lot more updates or it officially comes out. But if you guys have played Doors of Insanity or just from watching gameplay, I would love to know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think it's going to be the next big deck building roguelite? And I'm especially curious because at the time of recording this video, according to a poll I ran, 25% of you guys, your favorite roguelite genre is deck builders. So I'm really interested to see, you know, kind of what you guys think about this game. And if you like deck builders and roguelites just as much as I do, then consider subscribing and ringing that bell like all the big boy YouTubers say to see more content like this in the future. I make reviews, let's plays, and live streams mainly covering roguelites. But if you're going to be grinding out games of Doors of Insanity, I wish you luck and see you guys next time.